So let's see. Is that visible for everyone?
It's up. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So as Lex mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about how to stay safe online. We'll talk about some internet safety tips. We'll talk about frauds and scams, and we'll also do a little bit of an introduction to AI, since that is a very popular topic nowadays. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that this program is made possible by several funders, including RBC, the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, and Entente Education. So with this funding, we're able to do these presentations all around the community on a variety of topics. Before I get into the content, I just want to talk a little bit about why internet safety matters and why we should care. One big reason behind this is that we are leading increasingly online lives. So the things that we do on a day-to-day basis are becoming more and more impacted by technology. And so the things that we do, like shopping, banking, healthcare, and connecting with friends and family, is more easily done now online than before. And a lot of these services are becoming more and more popular. So whereas online shopping was a thing maybe 15 years ago, it wasn't as big as it is today, where a larger and larger amount of shopping is done online. And this is a trend that is only increasing with time. And so the more that we want to do any of these things, the more we have to be knowledgeable about technology and what's out there and be aware of the risks that come with using these services. So things like online banking carry a lot of benefits, but they also carry a lot of risks. And this is especially true when I mentioned banking because this is where a lot of personal information and money is involved. And so it's very, very important to know what's out there. One, so that if you are already using it, you know the risks. But two, if you aren't currently using it and maybe are curious about it, you are more prepared if you do decide to try some of these things out. There are a number of sources of risk online, and I'm going to group this presentation by talking about each of these topics. So we'll start off with a little overview of some scams and frauds. There's a lot of information on this out there. There are lots and lots of scams, so I can't get through everything today. So if anybody has any questions about specific scams that they'd like to talk to about afterwards, we can do that. There's also the risk of identity theft as we have profiles online and we post information. This gives hackers a chance to gain access to this information and use it to impersonate us in different scenarios. When we collect information from online, there's always a risk of misinformation or false information that we have to be aware of. And then finally, there are various privacy concerns. When we are online, we are sharing information, even sometimes unknowingly. So it's important to know how our privacy is being protected or not protected in certain situations. So I want to start off the scams talk by talking about some common features that we see in a lot of scams. Before I go into them, I want to preface that just because you observe any of these features doesn't mean that what you are interacting with is necessarily a scam. And also, there are scams that may not have any of these features. But when we look at the variety of scams that are out there, these are the most common features that we see across a large majority of them. Okay. So the first element is that these scams are often uninvited. So when there is some sort of scam about to happen, it is usually the scammer approaching you with some sort of offer. So if you're being offered some amount of money, this isn't something you've sought out on your own. This is the scammer has approached you, has somehow managed to connect with you, and is offering you some amount of money. The next feature that we see very often is a sense of urgency. So in any communications that you have with the scammer, they will often stress that any sort of action that you have to take must be taken very, very soon. So they will usually make threats or some sort of statement saying you have to act fast or there's some sort of time limited deal, and they may even threaten certain repercussions if you do not act on time. I just see we have somebody joining, so let them in. So the reason behind this urgency is that it gets you to lower your guard a little bit. So when we are told that we have to do something very fast, we are less likely to think carefully through what we're doing and instead act on impulse, which makes us more likely to fall for whatever scam the person is trying to get us to fall for. So this urgency is a tactic that these scammers use to try to get us to become more likely to fall for them. So when Lex mentions that people don't want to disclose that they've been a victim of a scam because of some feeling of shame, and your internal monologue is, well, how did I fall for that? Well, these scammers have a lot of tools at their disposal to make somebody who is otherwise very cautious and very careful act more on impulse and not think through things as carefully. So that's why they do that. Another element we often see is that there is a low risk, high reward element. So if something is promised to us, it's usually very lucrative, a very large reward. And then if there are any risks involved, they are usually said to be very low or even not mentioned at all. The common example I use for this is that there'll usually be some sort of wording in a scam saying that you have lots to gain but nothing to lose, or that this is a totally safe procedure, things like that, where they will really minimize any sort of risks. Again, getting you to try to trust them more and not think very carefully about what's going on. And any legitimate person who is offering you some sort of deal would be very careful usually to identify risks that you know what you're getting into, which is a responsible thing to do. But a scammer is more likely to sweep them under the rug, and make you think that this is totally safe. Something else we see quite often is a pay first element. So if there's any sort of transfer of money being involved, you will have to pay first. So the most common one I see, and this is so common it's cliche, but is the often called the Nigerian prince scam, or it's where there's an individual who usually emails you saying that um, some very wealthy person has decided to give you a huge amount of money. Either they've bequeathed it to you in their will, or they're investing in you, or they want to transfer it for some reason. Maybe you're the winner of a random draw, but they will promise you some huge amount of money. So it could be hundreds of thousands or even millions or tens of millions of dollars that is in an account waiting for you to claim it. And the usual script here is that you have to send a payment first. So they will ask for maybe $50 or $100 for you to send as a maybe processing fee or to unlock the transaction, is wording I've seen before. Once you do this, they say you will then get the money. Obviously, in these situations, as soon as you send that money, you will never hear from them again, unless it is to ask for more money. So the reasoning here is that when you see this huge sum of money, the $100 seems like nothing in comparison when you're stand to gain maybe $1 million. But you have to not forget that $100 is really quite a substantial amount of money, especially if you fall for this more than one time. Um, Another thing, this is similar to the low risk, high reward, but the scammers will communicate something not being a big deal. If there's some sort of transactions involved, even if it does seem like something significant, they will try to downplay it so that you don't think too much about it. Again, this is all getting you not to think carefully about the situation and to instead just act on autopilot and do whatever you think or whatever they tell you to do. And the last thing I want to talk about is that if there's any communications you receive from the scammers, these will often be full of spelling and grammar errors. So if they send you a fake letter or an email with some sort of claim, they'll often maybe make a typo in the name of the business they're trying to um, pretend to be, or they'll have just weird typos and formatting throughout. I've heard two different explanations. I think one is just that they can be quite careless or they don't know how certain things are done. So, for example, in certain CRA scams, if there's a dollar amount being listed, sometimes the dollar sign is placed after the number, which is not how we format it. And so this is usually if the scammer is just unfamiliar with how we format numbers, then that's more likely to happen. So one, it could be carelessness or just not knowing. But the other explanation I've heard is that sometimes these are intentionally included so that people who don't notice these are more likely to fall for the scam. So they don't notice these mistakes, um, and that kind of tells the scammer that they're not really paying very close attention, and so it's someone that is more likely to go ahead with whatever they're trying to do. So if you see any sort of emails that have typos in them from a reputable seeming source, um, take a closer look because it might be somebody impersonating that source. So those were some common features. Next, I want to talk about some common types of scams. There are way, way more than just these six. There are probably hundreds of scams out there, but these are some of the more common ones. And also these can group a lot of different types of scams together. The first one I want to talk about, this is often the most relevant, is a grandparent scam. The idea behind this is usually the scammer will reach out to you pretending to be your grandson or granddaughter asking for money. They'll say some sort of terrible situation has occurred, they're in jail or they're in trouble, and they need some money to get bailed out or to make some sort of call or to hire a lawyer. There's lots of different stories. Um, One thing is that this isn't necessarily going to be the classic grandparent scam. It doesn't necessarily have to be a grandkid or a granddaughter. It could be any sort of relative. But the most common one we see is this format. Um, and so I think usually the scams a few years ago were, it was just somebody calling and they were just by luck able to get a hold of someone who does have a grandkid. And so it worked that way. Nowadays, which is quite scary with AI, there are certain programs that can replicate people's voices. So just a couple seconds of recording someone's voice is enough to make a model of that voice that can then say anything. So in certain scenarios, these scammers can replicate the voice of an actual relative or somebody you know. I thankfully haven't heard of anyone at any of these sessions I've run who has this happen to them. Usually it's the more traditional, just it's a random person on the phone. But that is something to be aware of that could become more popular as time goes on. And so what I hear from a lot of people who have gotten these calls is that, well, I got a call from someone claiming to be my grandson, but I don't have a grandson. Or if the person does have a grandson, then the voice didn't really match. And so those are kind of, it's good when that occurs and you know that this is a scam because, the information doesn't apply to you. But there are so many of these calls going around, it's really only a matter of time before the scammer just by chance happens to get it right. So they impersonate a relative you actually do have, and the voice does sound right. And there's just enough of these features that kind of fall into place to make you believe that this is a real situation. So it's very, very important to know how to stay safe. And the number one tip that I can give for people to protect themselves against this and other similar scams is to have a family password. So a word that only you and your family know that has to be spoken before any sort of transfer of money or personal information occurs. This can really be any word as long as it is kept secret among you and the people who are at risk of being impersonated, who you would then want to help in some way. So I highly recommend that you set this up with your relatives. This is probably the best layer of protection because no matter how convincing the scammer sounds, even if they replicate the person's voice, they won't know the password unless you are sharing it online, which I don't think any of you would do. If this happens to you and you don't have a password set up, the other tip is to put the phone down and to call back your relative who's being impersonated at a number that you trust. This is not as strong because there's always a chance they might not pick up if they're busy or asleep or whatever it is. These calls often come in the middle of the night. So that's a less ideal way of protecting yourself. But if you don't have a password set up, that is a backup thing that you could do. Next are advance fee scams. So this is what I talked about with that Nigerian prince. They're more commonly called advance fee scams since it could be a lot of different senders contacting you. But as I mentioned, it's usually some sort of huge amount of money that is promised to you. You just have to pay in advance to be able to get this amount of money. And I think these are a little bit done to death. I think these are so common and have been around for so long that people are quite attuned to this type of scam. But nevertheless, I still get emails every once in a while offering me money. And it's just still a threat that's out there, and it can become more and more advanced as time goes on. So it's important to know that this still is around. Related to this, I wanted to mention that a common thing I see nowadays is people asking for gift cards. So even if there isn't necessarily a huge amount of money waiting for you, it might be payment for some service or something else. But if there's ever a business asking you for payment in gift cards, this is a scam. I think there is no situation in which this isn't sketchy. Businesses or even individuals just should not be asking you to pay in gift cards. The only reason they do this is because it's harder to track gift card transactions. So when a gift card is redeemed, there's not as much tracking information, so it's harder to link it to the scammer. So I can't often do this when I talk about scams, but I do have a blanket statement, and that is if anybody ever asks for payment in gift cards, it's a scam. So just walk away and don't engage. Next are romance scams. These also take a multitude of different forms, but the main idea behind a romance scam is to somehow exploit some sort of element of human connection in order to get the person to trust the scammer. So the most common way is through a romantic connection. So online dating, there might be somebody who, poses as someone looking for love, and they will reach out to someone, and once, they make some sort of connection, they'll start asking for things, usually money, in gradually increasing amounts. So it could be, a couple dollars here and there for a coffee every once in a while, which then grows to $20 for lunch, which then grows to $150 for, to buy something, and then can, go on and on and on until it's sometimes tens or th hundreds of thousands of dollars. The idea behind a romance scam and what makes it so successful in certain situations is that it targets vulnerable people, and it really uses this vulnerability to the scammer's advantage. So one common video that we used to show when we talked about the scam was a man in a wheelchair who had lost his wife a few years ago, and he was very, very lonely. And when he met the scammer who seemed to be romantically interested in him, he was much more likely than the average person to be trusting of her, and to send her money because he was desperate for this human connection. And so that was something that the scammer was able to exploit for him specifically, which might not have worked for another person. So just like with the grandparent scam, there might be a couple that come along that don't work on you, but it might just be a matter of time until the scammer just happens to, hit the nail on the head with something that really makes you want to give money. If it could be a donation for something, it could be to support a friend, any number of reasons. But it really gets at this human connection and vulnerability aspect. Account info updates are messages sent by scammers pretending to be services that provide some sort of account, like Rogers or Google, Amazon. They'll give you a message saying that you have to update your account for whatever reason, if there's some sort of privacy breach or your password isn't strong enough. They'll send you a form which you fill out your username, your old password, and then they offer you to create a new password. All this does is just send your username and your old password or your current one to the scammer so that they can then access your account. These are very tricky because scammers often do a very, very good job of impersonating the business that they are claiming to be. So with this, it's just very, very important to be very careful when you inspect any communications. So if they send you an email, look at what email address it's being sent from. So not just the name, but the address. And just look through and see if it leads you to a website to make sure that the website is really, Amazon or Rogers or whatever they claim to be. The best tip I can give for this one, though, is if it's something you have an account with, which it is, if they're sending you an email like this, go and sign into your account on a website you trust. So don't follow the link that they give you in their email. If it's Amazon or claiming to be Amazon, go to amazon.ca, sign in the way you usually do, and then you will see if you actually need to change your password. So it'll be under your account information, and there'll be some sort of warning saying that you have to act on this. So if you aren't sure if it's a legitimate email, just sign in and do it through there. And if you think, if you can't see anything, but you just want to change your password, do it on the website that you trust. Don't follow the links that they give you. This also applies more broadly that if you get an email that you aren't sure whether to trust it, don't click any links or go to any websites that they give you.
That's scary stuff out there.
It is. It really is. Next, I want to talk about some fake job ads. Sometimes scammers will pretend to be companies hiring for individuals and they'll post job ads online. Um, there are a multitude of different ends to this, why they're doing this. Sometimes it's to get access to your personal information, but sometimes it might be hiring for a fraudulent job. So the main thing I see with this is hiring for usually multi-level marketing schemes, which I can talk about afterwards if anybody's curious. But the main idea is it's a job position in which you have to pay to be able to work. So you have to buy product to then resell it. And it seems lucrative at first, but it actually results in you losing money over the long run or earning very, very negligible amounts. So with these fake job ads, if they're um, saying that you have to pay to do any sort of recruiting or any sort of stuff like that. And I know a lot of you probably aren't looking for work, but sometimes these are presented as kind of a more of a hobby type of thing. So, going door to door and kind of, chatting with groups and selling things like that, which is often popular among retirees. If they're offering you or saying that you have to pay to work or to get product, it's pretty much almost always one of these multi-level marketing schemes, which is a scam. And if it's a individual pretending to be a legitimate business, if you're not sure if the job ad is legitimate, go to the actual website of the company. So if it's Walmart, for example, go to walmart.ca, go to their job section and look on there. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about is tech support scams. I've had a number of conversations with people who have solicited tech support online as a service that they pay for. Now, there's a variety of services out there. Some are free, like ours, and some are paid. Paid ones can be quite good if they're from a legitimate vendor. But what I want to warn people about is that sometimes scammers will charge really, really high rates. So even if they are providing legitimate help, they're way overcharging, more than they should
Drop
be.
down. Oh,
Often I see things that are a subscription service. So they will say you have to pay, sometimes it's, I think, like $60 a month to have this sort of
big
coverage.
God.
This, in my opinion, is much, much more than anybody should be paying
I'm gonna
for
say,
tech help. So really just be
and I
careful
have
about the
used
amount that you choose to
it.
spend on some of these things. Also, there are fake tech support services out there. The one I most commonly see is as an ad on a mobile game where it'll be a window that pops up that says your device is infected with some sort of virus, it's not working, and it gives you a number to call or it redirects you to some sort of website where you can get services. Um, these are always a scam. If they pop up like this on your screen and it says you have a virus and it makes a lot of noise and there's flashing and all that kind of stuff, um, these are scams. You would only get this sort of warning if you had an antivirus program like McAfee or AVG or Norton installed on your computer, and the window would be from that program, and you would then go on it and find out more information. It wouldn't be a full screen, sort of flashing lights and sounds sort of thing. Okay. So next, I want to talk a little bit about privacy. The first topic I have is sharing information online. So if any of you use online services like Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, be mindful of the things that you share. It doesn't just go to your Facebook friends. It can go beyond that. It becomes publicly available to anyone. Um, and sometimes even if your account is private, there are ways for it to still get leaked in some way. So really avoid sharing things like addresses, travel plans, and health info. Essentially, think about this as soon as you post it, you've given up your rights to privacy over this information. So even if you think nobody will see it, assume that you are broadcasting this to everyone you know and also a bunch of people you don't know.
Mm.
When you have different apps on your phone, I recommend checking out privacy settings. So when they give you, usually when you install it and you're agreeing to things, I know nobody reads the fine print, but at least when it gets to some of the privacy stuff and things where you're agreeing to things, I would definitely read some of that. So the main thing I want to talk about for this is that when you install an app on your phone or you go on certain websites on your computer, if they need access to something like a camera or a microphone from your device, they have to ask for permission. So it'll say, do you want to give this app access to your camera? Before you agree, think about why the app is asking for it. If it's Zoom and it needs access to your camera and mic, that makes sense, that's fine. But if you've installed some sort of mobile game and it's asking you for your camera, your microphone, your call logs, your contacts, things like that, I would pause and try to think about why I might need it. And if you're not really sure that you trust it, I would just say no. When you use the app, if you then see a reason why it's been asking for that, for example, if the game needs access to your contacts that you can play with your friends, you can then always allow it later. But if you're unsure, I would at first just say no, just to be safe. I also recommend, for any of you who are curious, to go on your phone into the settings. It'll be different for each device, but it'll be something like permission manager or permissions, and you can see what sorts of things you have already given access to different apps. So on this picture of the phone that I have on here, you can see here that, for example, under calendar, there are certain apps that have access to the calendar. So I would recommend if any of you have a smartphone and you know how to access the settings, to go in and to see which things are being accessed by which apps, and to remove permissions if you don't want those things to be accessed. All right. So a little bit about account and password management. The big thing here is practicing good password hygiene. So for passwords, the more complicated and longer a password is, the harder it is for somebody to crack it. And usually these are computers that are running multiple different random strings of numbers and digits until they find the right one. So the more they have to run through, the more time it takes for them. So this is why you will often see these restrictions on when you're creating a new password, that it has to be at least 8 characters and ideally more, and that they have a variety of characters, so upper and lowercase, numbers and symbols. So these aren't just sort of tricks that the company gets you to do
Picture
to make
that.
it harder for you to remember your password. There really are legitimate reasons behind why it's beneficial to do this. Another good tip is to avoid personal details. So avoid putting in your name or your date of birth, just in case something happens to your password. Whoever gains access to it doesn't also have your year of birth or your name. Also avoid common sequences like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or password, since these are usually run first by these algorithms because they're quite common. The next tip is to consider not reusing passwords. And I say consider because I reuse passwords. So I don't want to come across as, facetious and telling people not to reuse them when I reuse them. Um, I think the accepted wisdom is that having multiple different passwords is more secure, since if somebody gets one of your passwords, they don't have access to all of your different accounts. However, I am lazy and I also don't have a very good memory and I don't want to have all these different passwords I have to manage. So I have kind of compensated by having one very, very, very long, very complicated password that I remember and that is essentially impossible to crack. Um, so I will say that the best tip I can give you is to use different passwords. But if you know you're not going to do that, at least have your one password be very, very secure. Certain devices like phones and internet browsers like Firefox and Chrome and Safari will offer password managers. So they will offer to remember your password for you and they will store it in a very, very secure way that you can then access next time you want to sign in. Um, some people have privacy concerns about this, and I completely understand that. So you don't have to use these, but it just something is, it can, might be beneficial if somebody wants to try it out. And the last thing here is something that is a little bit more recent. It has a number of names. The most common ones are two-step verification or multi-factor authentication or MFA. This is essentially when you are signing in, even if you put in the correct username and password, it then sends a message to your phone or your email with a code or a button saying, yes, it's me signing in, or a six-digit number you have to put in to be able to access your account. These are becoming increasingly popular, um, but people find them very annoying since it's an extra step you need to do before you can sign in. And I completely understand that it's annoying, but it is very, very beneficial and it works. The reasoning behind this is that in case somebody does have access to your username and password, they cannot sign in without also having access to your phone or your email, which is very, very unlikely. So it's just an extra layer of security that in case your account does get hacked, um, they aren't necessarily able to get in. So the message here is that if you ever get a thing on your phone or your computer saying you're trying to sign in, here's the code, or press yes to sign in, this means that somebody is accessing your account or trying to access it, and then it means that your password has probably been breached. So it is something you should very quickly try to figure out what's going on. So contact the account provider and see what's going on. So absolutely do not click yes unless it is you signing into your account. Okay. So that's all we have for scams, frauds, and privacy. This is a little bit of a change, but we want to talk about AI. And the reason we fit this in is because AI is becoming such a huge presence online that it is impossible to escape it. And so any sort of thing that you do online will somehow um, involve AI. And AI it just stands for artificial intelligence. And what this is, very simply, is computer programs that are good at thinking similar to humans do. This involves excellent pattern recognition and personalization to each user, but it is also trained on human information online. So websites, blogs, videos, all that kind of stuff. The reason AI is sometimes hard to explain or hard to understand what it is because it takes a variety of different forms. So the most common one, or the one that people talk about the most, is chatbots, things like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Copilot, which are the three logos I have on the right of the screen. And these are the ones that you can talk to, who can answer your questions, but who can also just, continue a conversation with you. There's also voice assistants. So like Alexa, which is the Amazon Echo we talked about, or Siri or Google, who you can talk to get information, and also online recommendations. Now, when you do a Google search, there's often an AI summary at the top that gives you an overview of the results. So AI is very varied, but it is essentially the sort of program that can kind of think a little bit ahead. So it doesn't just give you the information, it also summarizes, or it can tell what exactly you're trying to get at with your question and addresses it a little bit more specifically. AI has quite a lot of benefits, and this is why it is such a popular topic nowadays. It has a lot of insight into very niche or specialized topics that can be very hard to otherwise find. And it has a very broad range of knowledge. So it really does go through everything that there is online and even sometimes that's available in other types of media to then give you the answer that you were looking for. Because of its amazing pattern recognition abilities, it is also very personalized. So the more you use one of these services, the more it learns about what sorts of things you were looking for and can tailor its responses to you. So, for example, um, let's say I work with brain injury survivors. So if I were to ask it to give me some information about brain injury, it wouldn't have to start from the very basics. If it knows that I am already knowledgeable in certain things, it can give me a bit more complex or specific information that is more relevant to me. Some specific uses that AI is particularly beneficial for is for health monitoring tools. So keeping, for example, track of your symptoms, or if any of you have smartwatches that you wear on your wrists, they can track your health data and can then give you insights about your health. Various accessibility aids. So these Amazon Alexas are great for if your hands are busy or if you just can't get up and get to your phone at the moment, you can talk to them to get help. And also, AI is used to identify frauds and scams. So my phone now has, whenever I get a suspected scam call, it says on my phone that it's probably going to be spam. And this is a type of AI filter. So they train this AI to identify common features of scam callers, and they can then predict if a call is going to be a scam or not based on the sorts of patterns they find. That being said, there are a lot of risks to AI that are very, very important for you to be aware of. The first is fake information, or sometimes called hallucinations. AI is one, it's very eager to give you the answer to your question. And so sometimes it has a tendency to kind of make things up, which is very unfortunate, but it's just a feature of the way that it's been created. If it can't find anything, it kind of very optimistically gives you an answer it thinks you might want to hear. But then, by virtue of it relying on information online, if it reads information that is fake and then gives it to you, that's going to be an issue. So be aware that it is not an authoritative source. It is sort of a very quick summarizer of what's out there, but the information out there might not be completely reliable. Another risk is for things that are called deep fakes and voice scams. And this is when AI is used to replicate someone's voice or their likeness, so a video or a picture of them. I see this very, very often with YouTube ads of Mark Carney claiming to have some sort of uh, lucrative financial scheme. And it is a video that looks very, very like him, and it is him talking about this program. These are total scams. Celebrities and politicians are targeted because there's lots of videos and audio recordings of them online. So it's very, very easy for a scammer who has access to this AI software to replicate this individual and to make them say whatever they want them to say. So with this, the take-home message is don't trust everything you see online. In fact, quite a large chunk of it is AI generated and did not happen. I mentioned data privacy before, but just as when you post on Facebook, when you interact with AI, when you write a message, that message is sent to the computers or the servers that are run by the company you're talking to. So if it's Google, then it gets sent to Google servers. And that information is usually kept safe, um, but you never really know. And I can't promise you the information that is safe versus the one that isn't. So any sort of thing that you share, again, just assume that if you're typing it into AI, it's almost like you're broadcasting it. You're giving up your right to privacy for this information. So think twice about the sorts of things that you ask it to make sure that you aren't divulging any sensitive information that you wouldn't want out there. Related to fake information, if AI gives you some sort of help or info, this can always have the potential for bias. So because it uses human information from online, any sort of biases or any sort of skewing that is present in that information is then provided by the AI. It'll do its best in most scenarios to give you a very impartial and unbiased opinion on things, but this isn't perfect. So again, just don't take it at face value as totally impartial and totally correct. There is a potential for bias and misinformation in AI responses. And the last thing is for anybody who does use AI a lot, just to be mindful of the trend of over-reliance, not to rely on this too much. It's very, very convenient and very helpful, and it can be very tempting to use it for a lot of things. But just remember that whatever information it gives you, you are the final judge of deciding if you want to act on it or believe it. So just always keep in mind that AI is a tool. It's not in control of you. You are in control of it. So always at the end, think about what it gets given you and kind of use your own critical thinking when assessing the information that it provides you. Some tips for using AI safely. One, always double check information, especially if it's something important, related to your banking or your personal info. Go and double check with another source just to make sure that what it tells you is legitimate. Next is don't share personal information unless you trust. Um, the source that you're giving it to. So if you're, interacting with AI, I would just say don't share personal information or try to minimize it as much as possible. So the tip I give here, or the example I give, is that certain people like to upload certain medical scans to see if AI can find any sort of patterns that might have been missed. So if you do this, make sure you to remove any sort of personal information first. So you can upload the scan, but make sure to remove your name, date of birth, health card number, and so on. If you're unsure about any sort of information, check with someone. So if you've heard about some sort of news story that the AI has given you, just check with someone else to make sure it's really legitimate. Um, for videos, so the deep fakes I talked about, or pictures, learn to recognize AI generated content. So kind of read about what sorts of things are out there. I recommend looking up some videos of AI generated videos and see what they look like. Once you see them a lot, you'll notice certain patterns that are only present in AI generated videos. But unfortunately, with certain videos, it's actually getting much, much harder to tell. And there are plenty of videos that I can't even tell that they're fake. So this tip might have been more relevant even 6 months ago, but it's becoming less and less relevant since it's getting harder and harder to detect AI generated content. And lastly, just stay up to date with innovations. So read about the sorts of things that AI can do so that you're aware of what it has the potential to do. So a presentation like this is a good way of knowing how AI can be used as to scan by replicating somebody's voice. So just read about these things so you know what sort of risks are out there and what AI can and can't do. So to wrap up, I have a couple golden rules to summarize the stuff we talked about. One is to stop and think before clicking any sort of links or pictures or anything you get before you follow whatever it gives you. Just think about what this is and avoid clicking on it if you don't trust it 100%. If you get any sort of information from an individual claiming to be a business or a reputable organization, always verify with an official source first. So if it's somebody claiming to be Amazon needing to update your account, go to the Amazon website and do that there. If you're ever in doubt, don't respond. If you're not sure if the email is a scam or not, just don't respond to it. It's pretty much always better not to engage, even on the off chance that it is legitimate. And finally, if something feels off, ask for help. A second pair of eyes can be a great tool to try to find something you didn't see before and to identify any sort of discrepancies that are in whatever email or letter that you get. You can get help from family and friends. If it's financially related, a bank or a financial advisor can help you. There are government resources out there. There are guides on frauds and scams that the government has put together. And then this is I talk about usually at seniors' homes, but any sort of organizational staff. So I don't know what services Entente provides, but they might have certain tips or guides about frauds and scams that are out there. Okay, that's all I have for today. Thanks everybody for hanging tight. So I'm going to pause the recording here and then we can do questions.